You're tuned into Collateral Damage, the military family's FAP and IDC leave behind. Voices have been altered, because in this system, honesty has a price. Let's jump into Episode 6. Sarah's Appeal, Fighting Lies, Betrayal, and a Broken System.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're getting into something really tough but important.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking at the process of appealing a finding by the military's Family Advocacy Program, or FAP.
And it's not just policy talk. This is personal. It's about the re-traumatization that can happen during these appeals.
Exactly. We're picking up on a story we mentioned before, someone we're calling Sarah. We're focusing now on her fight to appeal a FAP decision. And just a reminder, names are changed for privacy.
Okay, so Sarah gets this news. FAP has decided she's the offender, and her reaction, just complete shock.
Yeah, she described as sobbing on the phone.
Yeah.
Totally stunned. Because, there was no interview with her. Nothing.
No hearing, no chance to give her side, any evidence, zero. And the person she accused, Derek, he wasn't labeled.
And the thing is, Sarah felt she'd done everything right. Sought help. Documented things meticulously, safety plans, talking to the right people.
Well, I've followed all the steps they tell you to follow.
And still, this was the outcome.
Yeah,
a real sense of injustice hit her immediately.
So naturally, she tries to figure out what's going on. She starts emailing FAP again and again.
But those emails didn't really get her anywhere, did they?
No. The replies were just vague, unhelpful. She said it felt like the system just wasn't built to listen, more like designed to shut her down.
Which, mirrors how she felt she'd been treated before, right? This feeling of not being heard.
Exactly. And it raises this huge point about FAP in her case. It felt like they were the investigator.
And the judge.
And the enforcer. All of that, but without giving her any kind of fair process. No due process.
Which is pretty fundamental. That lack of a fair shake basically pushed her towards getting legal help.
Yeah, she ended up hiring a military defense attorney. Which isn't easy or cheap.
No, definitely not. And even with a lawyer, just getting the basic information FAP used against her was a battle.
Right. They put in a Freedom of Information Act request, a FOIA request.
Which just went unanswered.
Yep. So no official report explaining why they made this decision. No written justification she could even look at.
It just seems like Derek's side of the story was, accepted, without giving Sarah a chance to respond or provide her own view.
Assumptions basically treated as facts.
And that lack of transparency, the inability to see the evidence used against you, it really highlights a power imbalance, doesn't it? It makes a fair appeal almost impossible.
So moving on to actually building that appeal, the process itself, it took a massive toll on Sarah. Emotional.
Oh, absolutely. She described it as shattering. Not just time-consuming, but deeply, deeply painful.
She talked about, severe sleep deprivation, couldn't eat, waves of grief, feeling numb.
And it's critical to understand this wasn't just leftover trauma from the abuse itself.
No, it was the act of being forced to dig through it all again. Meticulously. Every detail. To build a case she shouldn't have needed to build, that was re-traumatizing her all over again.
And what's really striking is the silence from FAP during this time.
Yeah. While she's reliving the absolute worst moments, screenshots, therapy notes, timelines, photos, FAP wasn't checking in. No support. Nothing.
Radio silence from the very program that's supposed to be there to help families navigate these things. It's quite disheartening.
She had to revisit messages where Derek twisted things, minimized his actions, completely rewrote reality.
That sounds incredibly difficult. Painful stuff.
Yeah, and evidence like telling her mom about a specific death threat because she genuinely feared for her life living with him.
Wow.
Even documentation about child exploitation material she'd found and immediately reported to base authorities. All of it had to be gathered and presented.
It really paints a picture of a system that wasn't just unsupportive, but actively adding to her burden. Being labeled the offender while having to prove you were the victim, that's an incredible psychological weight.
A total reversal of roles, really.
Yeah.
So she's carrying this immense weight, trying to compile all this evidence, and then her attorney gets involved more actively. That seemed to be a turning point.
Right. He listened. He actually believed her story. And he did something proactive. He reached out to Derek directly.
To get the information Derek had given FAP.
Exactly, and that's how they found out about this. Spreadsheet. Derek had apparently made a spreadsheet accusing Sarah of stealing a large sum of money.
A spreadsheet FAP seems to have just accepted. Without telling Sarah. Or checking if it even made sense.
Yeah, that's how it appeared, yes. The claim itself apparently ignored basic financial principles, but it seems FAP took it at face value, which is deeply concerning. Suggests maybe a lack of critical assessment early on.
So to fight this completely baseless claim, her lawyer advised her to take a polygraph test.
Even though she had bank records proving no theft occurred.
Right. Bank records showing everything was above board. But she still took the polygraph, affirming she didn't steal anything.
And she had to pay for it herself.
Yep, out of her own pocket. It just shows the kind of uphill battle she was facing, proving her innocence against claims that weren't even investigated properly.
The personal cost, emotionally and financially, can be huge when the system seems to presume guilt instead of seeking truth.
So with the polygraph results, the bank records, and her attorney's help, she puts together this formal appeal.
And this wasn't just a quick letter.
No, not at all. It was detailed,
Yeah.
annotated, directly tackling every false claim Derek made.
It included the polygraph results, naturally, the financial proof.
And really importantly, Derek's own writings. Emails, messages, things where he actually admitted to his anger issues, his mistaken beliefs.
Oh, wow. So his own words contradicted his claims against her.
Yeah, sometimes directly, even acknowledging she was a good person and his negative thoughts about her weren't true.
That's powerful evidence. It really undermines his credibility and points to maybe other motivations for his accusations.
The appeal also had character statements. Friends, even former partners, people who'd known her for decades, vouching for her integrity.
Strong support there.
And finally, it laid out potential ethical and regulatory problems in how FAP handled the case from the start.
And the outcome of this appeal.
It worked. FAP agreed to reconsider their initial finding.
That's a significant step.
Huge. But Sarah firmly believes it only happened because she had a lawyer pushing for it.
Which really highlights how crucial legal representation can be in these systems. It raises fairness questions for those who can't afford it,
Absolutely. So eventually, after FAP had already secretly decided she was the offender, they finally grant her an interview.
Wait, the interview came after the initial determination?
Yes, long after. And when she went in, she said there was no sign they'd even reviewed the detailed appeal she'd submitted.
That's troubling. All that work putting the evidence together.
Right. But she went prepared anyway, brought over 600 pages of documentation, actually handed over 300 pages right there in the interview.
600 pages. That just shows her determination to get the truth out.
She laid everything out. Derek's coercion patterns, the explosive anger, the emotional abuse, the sexual abuse.
All documented.
Yep. Evidence of her trauma symptoms. The email where Derek refused to release their marriage counseling records.
Records she thought would help her case.
Exactly. She believed they'd show a different picture than the one he painted. She pointed out evidence FAP should have collected but didn't. She even compared Derek's behavior point by point to the official DOD criteria for abuse.
So she was basically doing the investigative work for them, highlighting their own criteria.
Pretty much. She detailed specific incidents, him throwing things, punching walls, breaking stuff, slamming on the cart brakes to scare her.
Just volatility and intimidation.
Yeah, the power dynamics, the constant blame shifting, how he'd use Darvo tactics, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender.
Classic manipulation tactics.
She talked about his inconsistent parenting, refusal to set boundaries with his mother, how he'd never de-escalate fights, never take accountability.
Sounds like a very clear pattern.
She even brought his handwritten notes from marriage counseling, notes that showed disagreements, sure, but nothing like the abuse narrative he later presented against her.
The contrast must have been stark. His own notes versus his later claims.
And here's something really wild. She took just one email she had sent FAP way back before they labeled her and fed it into two AI systems, Grok and ChatGPT.
Okay.
Both AI systems, totally independently, concluded that based on that single email, Derek showed signs meeting the Army's own definition of abuse.
Whoa. AI picked up on it from one email.
Yep. And she included those AI analyses in her documentation. The fact that AI saw potential abuse while FAP, with months of her evidence, apparently didn't until forced to reconsider, she found that chilling.
That is quite a statement about the process. If AI flags it from minimal data, but the human system doesn't with extensive evidence, it raises serious questions about their assessment methods.
So during this interview, she directly tackles Derek's lies, the theft claim. She shows spreadsheets, contracts, texts, total financial transparency, no theft.
Just laying out the facts.
His claim she isolated him. She shows proof of trips she paid for, his family visits, even data showing how much time he spent gaming online.
Countering it with concrete evidence.
Specific things, like him claiming she hid his car keys. She explains, no, they were just in storage during a move, like lots of things. Yeah. Simple explanations.
And throughout, she kept bringing it back to her initial goal.
Yes. She kept saying, I was trying to get help for him, for us. I was the victim asking for support. This has only made my life worse.
Setting the record straight about her intentions.
But the response from the FAP's social worker conducting the interview, it was just deflating.
Oh, so?
Well, Derek's violence, like punching walls, dismissed as just him being outside his window of tolerance.
Minimizing it.
And the social worker seemed to equate their experiences, saying things like, once relationships start to dissolve, people protect themselves and might hurt each other, implying it was mutual.
Which completely misunderstands abuse dynamics. False equivalence.
Exactly. And they repeated Derek's claim that Sarah restricted his access to others, even though Sarah had evidence showing he had way more freedom and social time than she did.
So ignoring her evidence and just repeating his accusation.
Seemed like it. It shows a real lack of a victim-centered approach, doesn't it? Dismissing evidence, parroting the alleged abuser's claims.
Definitely. And there was more, wasn't there? About her health.
Yeah, this was particularly hurtful. The social worker brought up Derek's claim that Sarah used her migraines to manipulate him, like she'd pretend to be sick to avoid him.
Turning her actual health condition against her.
Right. And Sarah had to explain forcefully that her vestibular migraines were real, debilitating, and actually caused by the trauma she was enduring. The idea she'd fake it when he showed zero concern for her well-being was just absurd.
That's just awful. Taking a genuine trauma symptom and twisting it like that and having the system repeat it back to you, it's a failure of empathy, really.
So even after that really disheartening interview, Sarah didn't stop.
Still fighting.
Yeah. She emailed FAP again, sent more evidence, including a video taken just one day after the interview.
What did the video show?
It showed Derek showing up unexpectedly, filming her with 2 different devices, even though she was calmly asking him to stop. It was their first face-to-face interaction since this whole FAP thing started months before.
And his behavior.
She described it as controlling, provocative, intimidating, not the behavior of someone who felt victimized by her.
That seems like important context, especially coming right after the interview.
You'd think so. She sent the video clips, a shorter timeline, more documents.
And FAP's response.
They acknowledged getting the email, and then nothing. Nearly 2 weeks later, still no follow-up questions, no discussion, just silence again.
Even with more evidence, including video. That pattern of inaction is really concerning. It suggests maybe an unwillingness to truly reconsider.
And that brings us to now. Sarah is still waiting for a final decision. Weeks after the interview, months after this nightmare began.
That waiting must be agonizing.
It's become its own kind of torture, she says. Because when you've been through abuse, been wrongly accused, been ignored by the system, silence isn't neutral. It feels like more punishment.
It's re-traumatizing all over again. Every day without an answer reinforces that feeling of not mattering, of being dismissed. The psychological toll of that uncertainty is immense.
But Sarah keeps going. She keeps sharing her story because she knows she's not the only one. So many others face similar things, often suffering alone.
And her experience really throws a spotlight on what seems like a broken system. It claims it's there to protect families.
But in cases like this, it feels like it does the opposite. It can end up destroying them. We've talked before about the lack of real due process in FAP and the Incident Determination Committee, the IDC.
Yeah, the body that reviews FAP findings. It often seems to fail the very people it's supposed to help.
The mission statement says help families, but Sarah got no help. No counseling offered, no support, just judgment and accusations.
It seems the focus shifted entirely away from assistance towards just making a finding, regardless of the facts or the impact.
And, you know, FAP insists they don't technically investigate abuse. But looking at Sarah's experience, it's hard to call it anything else. So, listener, think about Sarah's journey. The lack of due process, the evidence ignored, the emotional cost, the re-traumatization. If FAP's actions weren't an investigation, what would you call it?
It's a powerful question to consider.
And if you've ever been through something like this with FAP or the IDC, if you've felt misidentified, silenced, or re-traumatized, please know you're not alone. And you are not defined by any label they put on you.
Absolutely not. Your experience is valid.
If sharing your story might help, Or if you want to connect with others who understand, you can email us. The address is militaryfamiliesleftbehind@protonmail.com.
militaryfamiliesleftbehind@protonmail.com.
We'll leave you with that thought. What really happens inside these systems, and who are they truly serving? Thanks for tuning in to The Deep Dive.